I learned to play the fiddle from Emmanuel Wood of Ozark, Missouri. Emmanuel had enormous hands, massive paws that spoke volumes on the fiddle. His fiddle's bridge was cut almost flat, much flatter than normal, so he could play 2 and 3 or even 4 strings at once, creating beautiful drones from his bow arm percolating rhythmically under the modal melodies. His music was always for dancing, but the drones and scratches of the open strings would mesmerize me. His reticulated bow arm, like a branch of old hickory, and the relentless drones he produced would send my thoughts to the ancient world, like a wordless prayer dancing on a Saturday night. The last time I saw Emmanuel Wood, he was lying down in bed, dying. Outside it was a gray and cold Ozark morning in 1981. The branches of the leafless oaks looked like spider webs silhouetted under the puffy clouds. Emmanuel gripped my hand and said, "Hello, you old fiddler." Those words felt like being welcomed into heaven by my teacher.
Fiddlin.
I'm thinking we want to do something that tells a story. And so let's tell a story. And it starts with me hearing Emmanuel in St. Louis and being completely struck by what I heard, to where I did research and found out how to locate where Emmanuel Wood lived, because in those days we had phone books, and he was in the phone book, and it was really nice. I could just call him up and, "Hi, I'd like to speak to Emmanuel Wood." Well, that's me. So everything kind of went from there. And so as I began to play his music, I began to hear it more deeply. And I was studying with a great violinist. I was studying viola with a great violinist at the time, and so I was taking all this quite seriously. And I could hear something in Emmanuel's playing that I also could hear when I would listen to Heifetz. And it's this granular sort of beautiful texture, these minute scratches and beautiful ways that the fiddle makes it sound with the bow on the string. I saw a lot of connection between Emmanuel and Heifetz. You know, nothing I could prove or even cared to prove. I just knew that musically I was drawn in both ways.
Right.
And so that kind of led me to his house, and I would go out there and I would study with him the same way I studied with Arnold Belnick, my other teacher, or Meli Mehta as well, who was another one of my teachers. I considered Emmanuel one of my teachers. And so sitting there in his front yard or in his living room and playing music with him was like sitting with a master. And I learned to play like he played. I listened to the way he played, and I tried to emulate the way he played as best as I could, and I got pretty good at it for a while. He was always entertained by that I could just pick up a tune that he played and play it in the way that he played it. It came easy to me because the way he made music on the fiddle just was so simple. It was so real and so intensely personal, and I just connected with that. So that led me to knowing Nelson and knowing Howard and knowing all these other musicians that I recorded and got to be friends with, because I'm an outsider. I'm not from that community. They remind me of that frequently. You know, I'm not a local. I have no real local roots. I can't explain why I love this music. I can't explain it. It's just there, and I love it. And and it goes back to when I was a kid. I went to Missouri in the summers to Kansas City, and I remember the beautiful golden late afternoon light across the oak forests or the sorghum fields. And I could imagine, I sort of imagined Emmanuel Wood, even when I was a little kid, that there'd be this old wise fiddle player out in the middle of the mountains somewhere. And sure enough, I found him. And so what I'm hoping we can talk about is how that music survives, how it came to life, how it survives. What does it mean to our heart? I mean, to me, it's not just music that makes me want to dance. It makes me want to remember something ancient. And it does that for me. It just seems so, you know, that I'm reaching back centuries. When I think of Emmanuel Wood's father was born in 1826, which means he was alive when Beethoven was alive. And so when I'm reaching back into Emmanuel's music, I'm reaching back in time. That's sort of how I feel about the whole thing. And so I'm hoping we can just talk about it, listen to some pieces, and let it grow from there. Because, I mean, Nelson can talk about it more than I can, but that's the kind of stuff that I want to, hopefully we can talk about and learn and have a nice discussion, and sort of like a little online party, an intellectual party where we're learning about this music and going along. Because I still see a connection to African music. When I listen to Rex play the guitar and Thelma play the bass, especially, I hear African music in there somewhere. I know that's crazy, but that's what I hear. So that's my speech for the morning.
Very good. I have been thinking this for a long time myself, Tony, because I think that your journey is a good story, an important part of this story, and I also think it makes Emmanuel Wood and some of these other musicians more accessible, because, you know, the story can be how you encountered them and then other things. And then I think that Nelson has so much to offer to a story like that, because he obviously grew up in this world, you know. And then so I'm just stopping here just to sort of acknowledge what you said, Tony, but I wanted to get Nelson's reaction to it, and then maybe we can just start asking some questions that might be useful for a future podcast. Just get started, you know, right now. But Nelson, what's your thoughts on what Tony said?
Well, I'm struck by how Tony really has an intensity of feeling that I think Emmanuel Wood drove to stimulate in people, to get that reaction, as far as you know. I don't know anything about this, but as far as you see these men's groups that'll go off and drum, and you'll see Buddhists do the Rikyo, you know, the chant, and if the repetitive and the driving rhythm is somehow, it takes people to an ecstatic state that is similar to what I think the music, 25-minute square dance, and the dance also takes people away from their problems, their troubles. It's therapeutic. It's a connection to an emotional connection to something other than themselves. And I hear that in what you're saying. Maybe I'm putting something in there that you didn't intend, Tony, but where it comes from, and how it survived. It certainly met a need for entertainment and the social life there in the hills, and it's something that changed as far as where people moved to areas that didn't. When Emmanuel had a gathering on Saturday night, I would see people there that I knew lived maybe 25 miles out into the county, and they would drive in for that, and there was not much other entertainment, and there were certainly passersby. There were folks from off is the term. Granddad never used that, but I've heard that term more recently.
OFF, off, like they weren't Ozarks, so they were off.
Yeah, they weren't from the Ozarks, but in any event, there were all sorts of folks that came, but the core folks, the ones who subscribed and were there every week, it was Efton Jones. He had this big dent in his forehead where a mule had kicked him, and my mother said, "See that man over there? That's why he has that dent in there. He got behind the mule." And you would have people like that didn't play music, they didn't dance, but they absorbed every morsel of that rhythm, that emotional release that I think they must have received from being part of it.
When you saw him playing, was he happy, or what was his kind of affect as he was playing?
I interviewed. I worked for an attorney in Ozark for a summer, and during that summer, I had a tape recorder and I interviewed Emmanuel Wood. So one of the questions I asked him was, well, what do you like about being 79 years old? Oh, he'd kind of think about it and groan, but he says, playing the fiddle, I guess. So I mean, that was the top thing that he mentioned, and that I think that was he didn't express himself a great deal emotionally. I certainly knew when I needed corrected and those sorts of things growing up, but it's not like there was a lot of verbiage, and I can contrast that with the other side of my family when everything comes out and there's all this discussion and I feel this way or that way. Emmanuel was not that way, but yes, the music and the fiddling brought him joy. And it's interesting, the former members of the MFFA, Missouri Friends of Folk Arts, they just gave all the recordings. They curated it and made it accessible, and they donated it to the Library of Congress. So they sent me a letter, and a copy of a letter that my grandmother had written to them. And the letter was very interesting as far as how did he feel about the music. She made it clear to them, and it applied for Tony being there to learn and to study the fiddle as well. It says, this really helps Emmanuel when you come to talk to him about the music or listen or play or whatever, But that was expressed in that in a way that I thought that she really was making a strong statement that this is where I see Emmanuel at his happiest in his older moments is having these younger people come in and seek out his music and being able to play it, have someone appreciate it.
That's certainly what I felt when I was with him. It felt like he was happy.
Yeah.
He had problems and he had health problems. He had all kinds of problems. But when he was playing fiddle and we were making music, I don't know. It seemed like he was on top of the world right then.
Did he love music just for its own sake, or was it because of the way it connected with listeners, other players, and the community? The idea that there'd be these dances and other opportunities to play. Was it about the people, or was it really just about the sound in his head that he wanted to hear?
I think it was certainly both of those things and more. I mean, it was just an interesting observation, and this doesn't really answer your question, but I think that it's pertinent. My father's side of the family immigrated from Cuba, and my grandfather met that side of the family in 1965, and my uncle from Cuba, my father's brother, was very perceptive, I thought, and he came and observed the music and saw how it manifested itself among family members. And from his view, this man's name was Celestino Hermilla. He says, your grandfather with the music has kept the family together. He really saw it as a glue that brought weekly almost every single one of Emmanuel's children, and it was a way to reconnect, talk about what had happened to each other among week, and the moments when the music stops and that sort of thing. But I never, until that uncle observed that, saw it as the elixir that just somehow kept folks together, and it did. I mean, my uncles, most of them showed up. One of them had moved to Kansas, but the rest of them, even when he would come to visit, everyone got together, and that was something they could agree on. They could certainly disagree on so much more, but the music they could agree on. So.
Wow. Did they all play? All these relatives?
Yes, all three of my uncles and my mother, they all played, and Uncle Ray was better on the bass, and he played mandolin in later years, did pretty well. My Uncle Robert, who moved to Kansas, was also very good on the bass. Robert had done radio in Cape Girardeau, and he became acquainted with some of the groups going through, and he played with Little Jimmy Dickens for a while. And but it was always backup, and he would play backup for more modern country bands around Springfield, Hatfield Club, and some of the other venues. But when he got together with his father, they were playing the old time.
No, I was just going to remind everybody that they're all playing this generation after generation. They're playing the same tunes. That they're reworking. It's this language. It's this thing that just keeps getting recycled and renewed generation after generation. This old time fiddle music.
Well, that gets to another question that I had. Whether Nelson and Tony, you can both answer this because you both obviously talked to him a lot. Did Emmanuel ever talk about what inspired him to pick up the fiddle? How did he learn all these fiddle tunes for the first time? Did he have a teacher or a mentor, or did he ever even talk about that, the origin of his fiddle playing?
I tried to cover that in my recorded interview with him, and on the Old But Tough record, he mentions he had an uncle, Adam Esri was his name. Adam Esri didn't live very far away from Emmanuel as Emmanuel grew up in the hills in Taney County. And Adam would come down, and Adam only knew one or two tunes. If I had my transcript, I could tell you it was I Had a Little Girl. I could tell you the tune that Emmanuel would hear him play all the time. But Adam, of course, didn't give him very many tunes, but Adam did construct a fiddle out of a cigar box for Emmanuel, and Emmanuel learned to play with that cigar box fiddle. But another one of the Esseries, Jess Essery, was remarkably talented fiddler. Jess Essery moved to Spokane, Washington, but he spent some time in Taney County when Emmanuel was growing up. I would say a large part of Emmanuel's repertoire came from Jess Essery, who was from every description I've heard about him, my grandmother and others, he was a very outgoing personality that everyone loved, and of course his capacity to connect with people came with the music, but it also came with his extroverted personality. So Emmanuel learned a lot from Jess, I would say. He most likely learned from other fiddlers because they were pretty regular dances down in the hills, and they would all get together. And he named some people there in the hills in the interview that they would play music together.
So he would listen to this music being performed or played as a kid, and then at some point joined.
Yes, he became the regular fiddler for parties, play parties, they called them.
So the play parties were already happening. They were going on with other musicians who were older than Emmanuel and had been doing it for a while, and then he was inspired by this to participate. Is that a fair sort of depiction of what you understand about him?
I'd say that's fair, and I'm leaving out an important influence here, and that was my grandfather's grandfather, Pap Essery, who had been the parent of Adam and Jess and these other fiddlers.
And Emmanuel's grandfather, when would he have been born? If his father was born in 1826, Tony said, I wonder when that Pat Espy would have been born, probably around the same time or even sooner.
Ozark time.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. Pap Essery was 20 years younger than his son-in-law. Pap Essery was born December 23 in 1846. So okay. Thomas Wood, Emmanuel's father, was 1826, and father-in-law was born 20 years later. Emmanuel came from Thomas Wood's second marriage. I believe his first wife died in 1893, and then Thomas Wood married Emmanuel's mother when she was 28 years old, married her in 1895.
And she was an Espy?
Essery, yes.
Essery, okay. Okay. So I get the impression then that there's dances that were going on that, you got to hear as a kid and growing up, and that Tony got to hear when he became interested, were going on in this community of Ozark going way back into at least the 1800s and maybe before. So it was just sort of almost like a continual presence in that community. Is that what you understand? Or did the music sort of evolve at a certain point within, Emmanuel's lifespan?
Well, there are probably other experts that are more aware of what was happening in Christian County during that time. But as far as Emmanuel's part of it, he before he began the regular Saturday night session, and that would have been in July of 1950, he would play occasionally for parties around within 10, 15 miles of Ozark. There would be a party over Linden, which is a small town upstream, up the Fiddlin River from Ozark. He played there's a large cave there at Ozark that occasionally there would be parties there. And he would,
In a cave? In a natural cave?
yeah, it's a massive opening. It's called Smallin Cave. It's open to the public now. But even when I was growing up, occasionally there would be a gathering and a party there. But they would play in these parties just occasionally up until the time of 1950 when Emmanuel bought the store on the Ozark Square, on the north side of the Ozark Square. And and this is something that Tony, in some of his questions, I think, touched on, and I wasn't aware of it until Tony, as an observer, pointed it out. I wrote liner notes for this CD that we recorded of Emmanuel's fiddling. And in there, I tried to address Tony's question as far as Tony asked Emmanuel when he's interviewing it on the video about, well, you know, you moved just, it's not over 35 miles from where you grew up in the hills in Taney County, and you moved to the town of Ozark. But the transition there was substantial. You know, I've read the newspapers in early 1900s that you can pull up online, and it's magnificent to be able to do that. And there was just a common theme in so many of the newspapers. There's no transportation in Taney County. We don't have the transportation. We need to become a viable economy. And so even though there was significant interaction, I mean, Emmanuel's brother would take firewood down to the people building the first power site dam there, you know, in 1912, 13, when all these folks had come from away from the Ozarks to build that. They would try to make money by giving them, and that was a significant trip. There's still these little hollows and hills were distinct, and I think just a little bit more Ozark than the town of Ozark itself. Ozark only had about 800 people when my grandfather moved there, but it was a significantly larger interaction of people than what was going on in Taney County at the time. So did this music evolve in Ozark? Someone that has their finger on the pulse of the time period would have to describe that better than I can. But my understanding as far as Emmanuel's music, it was something that was unique to Northeast Taney County as far as his family, his extended family, and the number of them who were musicians. And Emmanuel brought that to the town of Ozark. I don't recall him talking in the interview, even though I just didn't ask the right questions, possibly, about other people in Ozark. There seemed to be plenty who could square dance and attend and enjoy those parties, but as far as other musicians during the 20s and the 30s, now Byron Kelly, that's a different track. He was playing for this Riverside Inn. He was playing for a band there, and Byron Kelly would, he'd play bass, and I saw Byron Kelly play cello, but he played, and this was rather upscale little speakeasy. One of the owners had to serve time for making moonshine or whatever they were selling, and the Garrison family, and a lot of the several of the black families and Emmanuel Wood, they all worked in the 20s for the Garrisons in one way or another. So,
I was thinking that how important it is to all the fiddle players that I've recorded, including Emmanuel. They always talk about where they learned a tune. They always say, "Oh, I learned this one from so-and-so," or "I learned it this way or that way." There's always this sort of history to the tune by individual fiddlers. Emmanuel did that a lot. He'd talk about how he learned a tune from Art Galbraith or from one of his grandparents or whatever. He talked about that a lot.
that's right.
Hey, what I'm thinking is let's listen to one of Emmanuel's waltzes. Let's listen to Spokane Waltz. And it's in the key of C. And it's really got some interesting work on the bass, and of course Rex on guitar is doing a great job. Let's listen to that.
Spokane Waltz.
So I wanted to ask. So what it sounded like you were saying is that there was less transportation, which I'm assuming it primarily means roads in this area. That even other rural towns in that area. Is that correct?
Ozark was more metropolitan. Ozark had a train.
Oh,
Ozark
okay.
had roads.
All right.
So
It was like moving to the city.
yeah, but where Emmanuel lived was Bradleyville and a little town called Garrison, and they were just tiny little villages. And Emmanuel was a long ways from both of those little villages, and neither he nor his older brother started school until they were like, Emmanuel was like 12 or 13 years old the first time he went to school, and his older brother the same. So Emmanuel only went to school for 4 years. And
Wow.
that was only because someone built a school. It was just 5 miles to Bradleyville. It was too far for them to go to school. And a lot of his Esri relatives were illiterate. I mean, the documents I find, they signed with an X, but Emmanuel could read and write, and so could the Wood brothers. But and that's what I didn't explain very well. They're in northeast Taney County, and but you picked up on it as far as, yes, this was considered an advancement. In the interview, I asked Emmanuel, what prompted you to move out of the hills? And by saying that, I am making a distinction between Taney County and this metropolitan town of 800 people where the train track comes through, and there's actually a road to a larger town another 15 miles away, Springfield, Missouri.
Sure.
So when I asked him that question, he says, well, I'll tell you. And I'd never heard the story before. He says, and it'd be better if I read the transcript to you. He said, I'll tell you, I was working in the field, and the horse pulled the wagon over, and it broke the wooden spokes out of the wagon. And then I went down to Fern. Fern was living in the cabin where Emmanuel was born. They just got married. They hadn't been married very long. And he was exasperated. He just fed up. He says, I have to move somewhere where I can make a living. And so he and his mother and his new wife, they all decided that the opportunity was in Ozark, which sounds like, they're moving to another backwater place, but it was a big step up for him in his life to get out of the more extreme hills and hollows and get up more on the Springfield Plateau.
It was a rural to urban migration in a way.
Well, it's possible in the sense that, like Tony is saying, he gave credit to some other musicians in Ozark for teaching him some new tunes. But I know that Emmanuel was open to new tunes. I mean, one of the last ones that I thought he learned was one that Bill Monroe was doing, Gold Rush. The tune caught his attention. He wanted to play Gold Rush. I think that was Bill Monroe. But he also, I think, was very intent on preserving what he'd carried with him.
Right.
So open to innovation, but at the same time, he was going to make sure those old tunes got played.
And why did he care so much about the old tunes?
I don't know. Maybe the old.
They're better.
Yeah. There you go. Yes, that's a good answer, I think. And it took him back to where he'd listen to his grandfather play for candy pulls in the barn and different things.
Plus, if everybody's playing off the same sheet music, if you're playing Gold Rush, all of the guitarists, the banjo, the bass, the mandolin, they all know how to play Gold Rush. So you guys could play together.
Yeah, that's right.
Would he practice, like we talk about musicians? I mean, I know that, most musicians like to practice. Did he play a lot when he wasn't performing, or did he just mainly pull it out when he had an audience?
Well, your questions kind of are very perceptive, and they're very good, and I've thought a lot about just what you've asked right now. And yes, he did practice, but it was usually he would get it out in the afternoon, Saturday afternoon, and he would just warm up, a few hours before the dance, and that would be the primary time. But I'm aware that just to keep himself company, he would sit on the bench and maybe he'd play a fiddle tune on a mandolin or something, and so he would pick sometimes just to be doing while he's sitting in the shade. But that seemed to be almost for his own entertainment. But to actually practice, I would really like to call what the time he spent Saturday afternoon getting ready for Saturday night to be
Right.
that, exactly that.
When I was with him, he definitely practiced. He definitely, you couldn't play as well as he did without practicing. And what you could tell that he practiced because he would play certain passages and certain tunes. He'd play them the exact same way every time.
Mm.
And so he definitely, was spending his Thursday mornings fiddling around or something like that. I never saw him just on it like Nelson did, but when I was with him, we played all the time. So, but you wouldn't get as good as he was without wood. What do they call it? Wood shedding.
Wood chopping. Wood shedding.
Wood shedding. Yeah.
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 But
Let's listen to Gold Rush. Okay, we'll listen to Gold Rush and then come back and talk.
okay.
This is a great example.
All right, here we go. Gold Rush.
Gold Rush.
Great. So what do you take away from that tune, Tony, from Gold Rush?
It's just the epitome of an Emmanuel dance tune. It's Emmanuel kicking butt, basically. He's playing with his band at full throttle. Thelma's playing bass great, and Rex is thumping away on his Martin D28, and Emmanuel's playing, and Ray's playing mandolin. They're at their best. It's one example of many that is Emmanuel's group at his best at the end of his life, when his family band was playing together and they were playing so beautifully together. That's what I hear when I hear Gold Rush or Lighthouse or 8th of January, any of these. He brought him up to a certain level where it's a perfect example of his family band.
And his family band was performing and playing for so many dances for them. I mean, this was, I gather, almost a weekly thing. So on Saturdays, I mean, did the whole town come out, and did they talk about it a lot? Did he get a lot of press coverage? Was there people, I mean, in other words, was there a sense of the town that they had this special person living there and kind of made life worthwhile? Or was it just kind of like, taken for granted?
I think that there were a lot of reactions to his music. I think that I'm surprised. I've been recently in touch with some of the Christian County Historical Society people who write very well, who grew up in Ozark and knew Ozark, and they had never heard of Emmanuel Wood.
Huh.
I mean, that's not all of them, but there was this is somebody that's my age, and but there were plenty of others that were aware and they'd talk about it, and so I visited for the first time the Christian County Historical Museum, and they say that, there's people that come to the museum all the time that, ask about the Emmanuel Wood music. So those folks were around Ozark and they were aware of it, and so it, as far as publicity, Emmanuel would participate in some of the fiddling contests, and he won second place and won in Nixa. that I recall, and that was covered in the newspaper. And there's other ways that people became aware of it. But on Friday, all these farmers from outside of Ozark, they'd come in from Oldfield and Sparta and Nixa, and they'd go over and they would play checkers there in that store after 1950. Now, before 1950, Emmanuel is he's got a dairy that he's delivering milk, he and his kids and her oldest son anyway, up until the war, and then before that, Emmanuel was making money as a tenant farmer for the Garrison family on their property growing strawberries, and he would also make money plowing around people's farms around Ozark. But when he got the store, that's when that became a regular thing, and people became known. It became known to the other people, and I think a lot of young people would have known about it because during the 50s, the kids with cars, they would just circle the square on Saturday night. That was primary entertainment. They just circle and circle and circle. So they knew that music was going on, but young people, teenagers, high school, they were not interested in that kind of music, of course. So these were older folks, and my perception of the crowd was there was a core part of the audience that came from small towns and farms outside of the city of Ozark itself.
So it almost sounds like it's kind of a therapy for hardworking people who didn't have things like, necessarily back then radio or TV to kind of give them a break. So this was something maybe that they looked forward to because they could kind of lose themselves for a few hours, after a hard week. Is that how you saw it?
I think that was a big part of it for some people, yes.
Yeah.
That probably went back for centuries, that exact pattern. Yeah. Farmers getting together on a Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening for a dance or for recreation. It's probably something historically continuous.
And and I'm sure that it had that impact on other people as well.
And to be able to play it, or just to listen and dance to it? Everything?
To be part of it, to play it, and I just think, just as you described the music and chart, I think that there's something about, a good session like that really draws some emotional experience out of people that resolves some insoluble aspects of their existence. It just
right.
It patches, it mends, it leaves them happy. And when I first moved to DC area, what's interesting to me is not so much, it is interesting what the impact is and how people react to the music there in the Ozarks and in Ozark, the town. But it's interesting to me the reaction that I've observed from my cousins who lived in Puerto Rico, from his immigrant family from Bolivia. They've heard, some of them have attended when I was playing for square dances. They say this music is always happy. and my uncle in Puerto Rico, he says, I don't know why my daughters like this music, but they would keep putting Emmanuel Wood on there and they would dance together. They'd never seen anybody dance to the music, but they would be enjoying it. But there's something about all of it. It's not sad music. At least the dance music isn't, and people get happy, and it may actually be universal in some sense. I just observed it hit a couple other cultures, and that was their reaction. So
There's this other kind of quality as well. The happy, expressive dance thing is one, but there's a lonesome sound. There's a kind of fiddling that Manuel did that would be described as the lonesome sound. Droning strings, minor tonality, modalities, kind of an interesting contrast to that happy, because I agree the music does come across as pretty uplifting and happy and whatever, but there is this other thing, and let's listen to Green Valley Waltz.
Green Valley Waltz.
This is
right.
an amazing. I've got a couple of different versions of that tune. And the one that we're going to listen to has Rex playing guitar, but he's not playing in his normal block style. He's doing walking bass lines on his guitar. And so, but this would be an example of that lonesome sound.
What was the song's name again?
Green Valley Waltz.
Okay.
Green Valley Waltz.
Definitely.
And so I'm going to figure out how to edit this into an episode. Maybe it ends with the idea that this is music that's happy, and that's an episode.
Perfect. I think you're right. I think we've kind of reached a point right now where we could probably stop and then let you work on it for a while. And then if Nelson is good enough to give us more time, maybe we can do another part to this. But I think you've given us a whole lot, Nelson. I think that this is really wonderful. You're a very expressive interview subject, and obviously your memories are golden for all of this. So I really enjoyed this. I think this is going well, and I think obviously Tony, if you can edit it and make it sound a little even smarter, make me sound smarter for one thing, I think that'll be great.